The Hornets lose their last game on the road in a while. Thank goodness they're back at home. Brandon Miller bounces back, and we discuss it all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. There's Doug Branson. As always, you can find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm Walker Mail. You can catch me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. And there's David Walker making his weekly appearance. You can follow him on Twitter at David B. Walker. Guys, the Hornets are back home, and I'm glad that they're back home. So Steve Clifford, he was even telling you after last night's game, after a poor performance, especially late, it was within striking distance for a while. And then in the fourth quarter, that's when you had different guys hitting three-pointers. They got hot, and eventually that game was out of reach for them. But even Steve Clifford was telling you, I'm tired. Sam Farber was on Mac and Bone telling you that he's tired and he's glad to be back at home for so long. 8 straight games at home. It's a ridiculous home stretch. It's a record-setting home stretch for the Charlotte Hornets. How much should fatigue be a factor in how much this thing kind of fell off the tracks over the last, is it too short of a time to say last 2 weeks? It's probably 3 weeks. They've been at home some over the last month, but it's been pretty bad here. David, how much should fatigue be a factor in what we saw with their road stretch, watching them lose finally to Cleveland yesterday?
I mean, I think it is a factor, whether it should be or not. I mean, you can see it kind of in their posture and their gait and their facial expressions. You could see it just littered all over. I mean, when Farber is not bringing the heat, not no shots, but when he's exhausted, come on, guys, they're out there getting pounded, cannot score the basketball with any efficiency. And, it's been a long stretch. I bet they're very angry at the NCAA, like Doug was last week, like most people are all the time. It's just ridiculous.
Doug, how bad should it be? Is it a legitimate excuse for what we've seen lately?
I think, 14 out of 18 on the road. I mean, that's a pretty brutal stretch. There's no doubt about it. And the level of competition, and we said this from the very beginning when we looked at the schedule all the way back in August of last year. We looked at the schedule and went, wow. I mean, they really better do some work early, because the latter part of their schedule gets pretty intense. And we talked yesterday about how Brandon Miller in particular looked different, a different kind of player. Didn't have that spark that he had earlier in the season. And, we speculate. I said, look, I hope it's something physical, and not mental. And I think it is physical. I think he's tired. I think the team is tired of being out on the road. And so it'll be good for them to come back home. And, when you just look at them offensively, they're completely out of rhythm. They're completely out of place. They're frustrated with each other. And I just think it's staying in hotel rooms. It's being away from family. It's all of that stuff that just takes a toll on you at some point. And they've got to regroup here, because it still is important now that they're back home that they actually play well to close the season out. So hopefully that is, other than the core issues of this team, which are the injuries, which are the fact that your two best players right now, Miles Bridges and Brandon Miller, are high volume, low efficiency scorers. Other than that, fatigue is a problem.
Well, and so when we go back home, this doesn't mean, okay, now the Hornets are back at home, expect the wins to roll in because it was only their road trip that contributed to their losses. No, the schedule is hard. We just went over the schedule yesterday. You have a lot of really good teams coming to town, and you really have to evaluate the product that you're watching more so than the win-loss record, because they're still going to stockpile a lot of losses despite them playing. I guess they have 11 more games left in the season, 8 at home, and then the last 3 they're going to be on the road. So now when you have the YouTube comment that says, oh, I thought y'all just said it was fatigue, that was the problem. They're still losing. They're still losing at Spectrum. Okay, Walker. Okay, Doug, David, you too. You make a weekly appearance. You can catch this heat as well. Nah, man, they're still going to lose a lot. I just hope that the product looks a lot better at Spectrum Center too. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I'm a man of the comments, so
that's true. You do represent the wrong party, yeah.
But yeah, I will say, like, this is not excuse making. This is just fact of the matter right now. And like, excuses be what they may, the offense is still deplorable, and like what they're putting out there right now is not only a factor of fatigue. Yes, they are beat down and exhausted. But, you know, the way the team is made up, the way the injuries are piled up with them, the execution has just not been good enough. And the numbers bear that out. I mean, they are playing like one of the worst teams in the league right now. So it is what it is, but it's no excuse for not being able to get to 100 points. But
that's what we're really talking about here, right? We're talking about degrees. Like they're not going to suddenly come home to Spectrum Center and be a good team. But they right. You know, can probably stand not to get blanked by 20 plus every game. And when I talk about systemic issues, guys, there are only 4 players that have donned a Hornets jersey this season, 4, that have an above average points per shot attempt according to Cleaning the Glass. That's going to be your measure of offensive efficiency relative to the position that you play. There are only 4 players. 3 of them, or 2 of them, one of them doesn't play for the Hornets. 2 of them are injured, and one of them is Nick Richards. It's Nick Richards, Mark Williams, Terry Rozier, who plays for the Heat now, and Seth Curry, who was injured. Okay, 4. That's it. Everybody else is below average.
Yeah, it's been really bad offensively, and you see this again against the Cavaliers last night when Cleveland's able to separate. They score 115-92. Now, maybe we get to this in the next segment. Brandon Miller did bounce back, and so let's do that. Let's go to the next break or a segment, and then we can talk about the rookie finally giving us a good game, the first one in a little while. Coming up next on Locked On Hornets.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
What contributed to Brandon Miller scoring 24 points? I believe it was one of his 10-game highs this year. It's in the top 10 scoring performances of his season so far. What went into that? We'll get to that in just a moment here on Locked On Hornets. Before we do that, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's demon time on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and goblins are the new ways and the most exciting ways to play at Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts, and you can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA to redeem all of the awards. Prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. One more time. prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. More Locked On Hornets ahead.
Welcome back to the Locked On Hornets podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, the video looks considerably different because we've had a number of technical issues here trying to record this episode. So many technical issues, in fact, that Walker had to leave to go do his professional radio show. So it's just David and I here with you via Zoom to figure this thing out and to continue to talk about the Hornets. But that's how dedicated we are, David. We are going to fight through this haunted house that is this podcast right now and continue to talk about the Hornets.
Absolutely. We're a man down, but, you know, the pro has left. So with him go all the rules. Let's get crazy.
Let's talk about Brandon Miller. We promised it. He had a bounce-back game. Walker and I yesterday discussed how he didn't look like the same player, but all of a sudden he scores 24 points on 44% from the field, not crazy efficient, but 37.5% from three. Looked like the three-point shot was back. David, had you noticed Brandon Miller looking a bit sluggish, and what did you think about his performance in this game against Cleveland?
Yeah, I mean, like we said a little bit earlier, everybody looks a little bit sluggish right now coming off of this road trip, just kind of beaten down, and you can see it a little bit in Brandon. I mean, we've seen so much from him this season in terms of energy, trying to fire up his teammates, being fiery towards his teammates, right? Yelling at guys to get back. So it feels like a guy that really takes a lot on himself to perform at his best every night. And that hadn't been the case as of late. His minutes have still been there, as you guys probably hit on. You know, he's still playing pretty big time minutes for this team because he has to, one, but also because he's one of the, you know, yeah. But he's also, you know, one of the best offensive players they have out there. So, yeah, it's good to see him bounce back. And I mean, that was really all you were watching for right now, or it's like one of the things that's a silver lining throughout this whole season. The fact that he's been able to really, you know, stay healthy the whole season and have a really good rookie year. So you're very glad to see that. He just can't do it. I mean, he can't do it all himself. 24 points. The team doesn't get to 100, you know, so you can see the slack that needs to be picked up.
Well, we're going to see a game sometime in the future where Brandon Miller is able to drag this team to a good offensive performance. That's what all NBA players do. They're able to score enough, have enough assists, play make enough, get enough rebounds where they can drag a bad roster, an injured roster, to a couple of wins. It's just Brandon Miller isn't there yet in his rookie season. But what I liked about this performance is that he was able to score on all three levels. He was showcasing it all scoring-wise. He was hitting his three-point shot. He was getting to the mid-range. And then he drew 4 Cleveland fouls and had 5 free throw attempts in this game. And here's my other thought. As I watched Karis LeVert really stay locked in to Brandon Miller, especially when Miller was floating in the corner waiting for Mann or Micic to drive and kick, LeVert was just not moving from the spot and really staying locked on to Brandon Miller. And I thought, man, you know, I think Miller, Eastern Conference Rookie of the Month a couple of times now, you know, is he a victim of his own success in that defenses are finally starting to respect him? And there's two sides of this, right? They're respecting him, but they also understand that they can take him away, especially if he's playing without Miles Bridges, and they're fairly confident that they could still function defensively if they leave Karis LeVert out on the island with him, because it's going to open up driving lanes for Micic, for Mann, for Miles, but none of those three guys are elite finishers at the rim. You're not going to do that if LaMelo Ball's on the floor, but they don't have an elite finisher at the rim, and so that makes it a lot easier to make that calculation. But he looked, you know, locked in. He looked locked down by LeVert at certain points of the game, and then when the ball got in his hands and when he was initiating the offense, he looked a lot better.
Yeah, and plus with Cleveland, with those two big guys back there, you know, those guys can also afford to hang, right, and stick with their guy a little bit more. And there's, you know, there's one guy they're going to stick with, it's going to be Brandon Miller right now, which is a lot. You know, it's a lot for any rookie, and it's a lot for someone who's a young guy who's trying to carry the team, the offensive load for a team. But look, I mean, the good news is, you know, he did have a couple games like that at Alabama last year. So he has been the guy. I mean, obviously we knew that about him. So I think you're right. Like, you can kind of project that going forward as he gets stronger, as he's able to kind of manage an NBA season, as he learns that, as he plays a little bit more. So, yeah, you know, and to your point, like, the more he's able to add that the creation element for himself to his game, it's just going to be that much better. But, I mean, you just have to continue to be happy with what you're seeing, applaud the effort that he's giving. And, you know, you'd love to hear something from at the end of this season, maybe, like, how much it took out of him at times. Because, I mean, you talk about the grind, you talk about the dog days of the NBA season right now with literally nothing to play for. Like, there's nothing on the horizon. That light they see is a train, like, and it's coming. It's heading right for them. You know what I mean? So, like, it'll be interesting to see over these next 8 games at home what kind of energy they can bring and try and get a few wins here.
Yeah, you know, the other part of his game that's gone away, and it's not really his fault at all, and that's his transition play, how strong he was in transition. And I think you can trace a lot of that back to the fatigue that they're experiencing right now, having been on the road. They're not pushing the pace anymore. They're not getting a ton of deflections. The defensive aggressiveness is gone. We didn't mention this in the first segment, but they've done 14 of 18 on the road, yes. They've done that largely with an 8-man rotation. No one runs an 8-man rotation anymore. That's like 90s stuff. You know, I mean, even the really good teams are running 9, 10-man rotations as they get ready for the playoffs, and the Hornets are running 8 guys out there for a significant portion of the game. And so, you know, a lot of the zip, the zest of life of this offense is gone, and that means less transition opportunities. And the transition opportunities that they do get, and you saw it in this Cleveland game, the transition opportunities that they do get, they blow it. I mean, how many transition looks did they get against Cleveland where like Man or Micic was running out, or Poku blew a layup, Man had a turnover, he had 4 turnovers in the first half. They get these opportunities on the run and they can't execute on them. And so, you know, once Curry comes back, once LaMelo comes back, once, you know, they maybe add another playmaker in the draft, or, you know, Cody Martin is somebody that also has a high assist percentage. They got to get some playmaking back on the floor before you can ever really fairly evaluate where Brandon Miller is. So I think we have to say that as well. So yes, but it was good to see him though, you know, this last game on the road before coming back home, get out of the offensive funk and be more aggressive. I think he took 8 shots in the first half, I think 10 in the second half. And so I did enjoy seeing that. I think it was important for him.
Yeah, and 5 of 5 from the free throw line, and those 5 attempts are the most he's had in all month. I think he had another 5 attempt against Phoenix, so he was able to get some from the line. I mean, nobody goes to the line anymore in the NBA, I guess, is the new thing. So there's not many free throws to go around, but yeah, so he's able to get a few there to help him get a few more points, easy points, right, and saw some of those go in. So. Man, it's just like, you know, he's been a revelation, I think, and like to the point where you guys are talking about it a little bit. You know, the national folks, or if they do peek in on the Hornets, they are looking at Brandon Miller. They are liking what they are seeing, and yeah, just protect him at all costs. Give him whatever he wants. Give him his favorite meal when he gets back to Charlotte. I can't imagine these guys are going too hard at practice either right now, right? I mean, just trying to finish out the season healthy. And maybe get a few wins. So Brandon Miller, man, it's been like I said, literally the only silver lining, all season for this team.
And I said it last show, you know, to actually compete for a win against any of these teams, everybody has to play perfectly. I mean, that when you're running an 8-man rotation,
or at least play. Right, like their new pieces haven't been playing at all. I mean, that was the little jolt of energy they saw in that little mini run, and those guys most of them aren't available.
Right, but to not get blown out by 40, which they didn't. To be fair, this was not a 40-point loss. To not do that, you've got to have one or both, preferably Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges, stepped up. Miles struggled to shoot in this game. Thought he played okay defensively, but Brandon, I thought opposite. He scored really well, and I thought defensively he didn't look very good. Wasn't generating much in the way of deflections, and then Karis LeVert really and Niang had their way with him off ball, and he wasn't the only one. It wasn't just him. Everybody defensively was, especially in that second quarter. Speaking of second quarter, David, I've got a stat for you. I've got 2 stats for you. One about the second quarter and one about Nick Richards. Some neato stats coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. I'll get to those neato stats. Also, Rod Boone produced a column, I guess it's a column. It's an article. I don't know what we call it these days, but it was about Miles Bridges. Is he crucial to the Hornets' success next season? That was the basis of the article. I will ask David that question coming up next. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who is unbiased on your life. So today I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking the same thing this week. Technology. It has abandoned us. It has forsaken us on this episode, and it has really snowballed to the point where I'm just questioning whether I should just throw all of this technology in the trash can and figure out a new technique. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to take a breath. We're going to figure this thing out. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it is important to get things off of your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online. It is designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Back here on the Locked On Hornets podcast, David, I promise you 2 stats for your face. One on the Hornets in the second quarter and one on Nick Richards. I give the choice to you, my friend, the freedom of choice. What would you like to hear first?
Yeah, I'm always a fan for Nick Richards stats, so give me that one.
This comes to us courtesy from NBA University on Twitter at NBA_University. Nick Richards has 26 goaltending violations this year. That is 11 more than second place.
Just like maybe a point of emphasis on the old chalkboard before one of these games. Just a reminder.
When the ball's going down, bad, no block. When the ball's going up, yes, rules. Block.
Maybe he's showing his hand for FIBA. Maybe send some tape out to some FIBA. I don't know. They can do that over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably something that they can clean up, that he can clean up in the offseason. I think, too, you have to factor in the idea that he is the only center on the roster, right?
That's true.
He has had a lot of responsibility down low. You saw it in this game against Cleveland. He was, anytime that Garland or LeVert got free and got going towards the rim, he was having to, help side block. And so there have been a lot of opportunities, and I think when there are so many opportunities because so many guys are getting into the paint, just statistically, you're probably going to be more likely to commit the goaltend. So there you go, Nick. I let you off the hook. All right, I'm not letting the Hornets off the hook in the second quarter. David, I looked this up because, man, another stinker in the second quarter, 31-17 in this game against the Cavaliers. They allowed the Cavs to shoot 7 of 10 from 3, and they also scored 8 points off of 3 turnovers. Over the last 3 games, the Hornets are only averaging 17 points per second quarter, and this is incredible. I cannot stress how incredible this stat is. In terms of net rating, so taking your offensive rating, your defensive rating, combining it together, net rating, points per 100 possessions, minus 76.4 in the second quarter over the last 3 games.
Wow.
If you stretch that out to the last 5 games, it does get a little bit better at minus 55. Second quarter, when they break the lineup, and they don't even break it all the way because they're only playing 8-man rotation. So you're going to have, 2, sometimes 3 starters mixed in with the bench. But when they go to this bench, it is an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, that's terrifying. You look at the first quarter; they're hanging in there. Things are okay, and then that second quarter just knocks them straight out, man. I mean, but there's not much you can do when JT Thor's back in the rotation. You kind of know how it's going to play out. That was not meant to be a direct shot at JT Thor or anyone else out there throwing their best effort out there, but that's just fact of the matter. They're having trouble keeping up as they were, kind of before they made some of those trades and retooled the roster a little bit with, NBA rosters at this point. And that second quarter is just brutal. And I feel for them. They see it happening. They see it coming again. They just want to get home. You know what I mean? And so all those factors come in, and these guys are fighting to stay above water right now. But yeah, that's not a good sign for the second quarter.
No, but look, now that they are home, if it is truly a thing where it's like fatigue, then hopefully we'll start to see those second quarter numbers even out a bit. All right, so let's shift gears. David, you're on the show, so of course, it's like clockwork, man. Anytime you're on the show, something about Miles Bridges happens or is released, and in this case, it's something I think that we could say is at least not negative. This was a article or a column by Rod Boone in the Charlotte Observer, and it's titled "Bringing Back Miles Bridges is, quote, very crucial to the future of the Charlotte Hornets." And in this column, it's really an interview, I guess, that he did with Grant Williams, who has known Miles Bridges since they were 15 years old, and just interviewing Grant, one of the new additions to the team, about what he thinks about Miles' game and what he means to the Hornets. And Grant Williams is the one that said that, Miles Bridges is very crucial to the future of the Hornets. I want to read some stuff here and then get your thoughts. This is a quote from Grant Williams. "If you know Miles as a person, you know how he is and how respectful and how much of a good guy he is. It's just a matter of making a mistake. For him, he's just trying to be the best player he can be, and he's done a phenomenal job of that and recuperating his former self this year." And Rod, for his part, throws some stats for you here on Miles Bridges, who will be an unrestricted free agent in July. Rod says he's done little to decrease his value on the court, posting per game career highs in points, 21.3, rebounds, 7.5, defensive rebounds, 6.4, steals, field goals made, and three-pointers. His points average ranks tops on the team among those who've played in enough outings to qualify it. His usage rate, 24.9%, has never been better. Also goes on to mention how many minutes Miles has played for the team this year and how, after his suspension was up, how available he's been. He hasn't missed he's only missed one game, the one where he wasn't allowed into Toronto due to not being able to get through customs because of the felony domestic, or the charges, I think, that he was facing post those felony domestic violence charges. So, David, I threw a lot at you there. What do you think about this piece here by Rod Boone? I guess, I don't know how you could take it as anything other than advocating for Miles Bridges' return to the Charlotte Hornets in free agency next season.
Yeah, and the question I have with Miles and the organization as a whole, and has been kind of since they made their initial run at him before all the off-court issues was, is that their only plan, or do they have a backup plan? I mean, do they have another way to work things? Because if you're looking at this roster right now, he's indispensable to this roster as it's set up right now.
To this roster today, as it's currently constructed right now. Yes. Exactly.
And so I would agree with Grant Williams and anyone else making that assessment at this point. The thing they've got to ask themselves, and I hope this has been a continual evaluation throughout the season, which has been tough to do with the injuries and whatnot, is that going to be the plan moving forward? I think in the past you had to look at him as a 1A, a 1B type of guy. Do you even need to look at him in that lens right now because of the addition with Brandon Miller? So I think that changes the landscape a little bit. You mentioned he's going to be unrestricted free agent. I guess that changes things a little bit. You think his team and he will go out and talk to other teams at this point. He said no to the trade in the season, but that's still a bit of an unknown. I mean, you feel like the Hornets, I guess, if they wanted to, had a leg up. But like for me, it's an overall view of the team, how confident they are that LaMelo Ball is going to come back, how confident they are that they can maybe hand at least some of the keys to Brandon Miller moving forward, and how those pieces are going to fit together. And if not, what's their backup plan? Because here's the thing, they do need the talent. Anything moving forward, the roster is going to need the talent, whether it's from Miles Bridges or whether it's from, that same tier level of player. So that's dead on. They can't afford to move forward without someone in that role that's going to be able to give them, 20 and 7 on a nightly basis.
Exactly. He is a talented player. He's an above average offensive player, and I think average to above average defensive player at that position. And the stats bear that out. And now as a scorer, he has been very inefficient this season, because that's the issue that I take with this article is that all those stats I just listed are just kind of bare stats: points, rebounds, steals, field goals made. They don't take into account the fact that he's just been awful in terms of his efficiency and in terms of his shot profile. The question that the Hornets have to ask and answer themselves is how much of that was a product of LaMelo Ball not being on the floor.
Right.
And
right.
how much is it going to cost you, because he is an unrestricted free agent, how much is it going to cost you to bring back a player that I think you're pretty confident is not a 1A anymore? You're certainly not as confident as you were when you were about to offer him a near max contract several years ago. And this, I'm just going to put all of the off the court stuff to the side for a second and say just on the court, he doesn't look like that player. And again, how much of that is LaMelo Ball? How much are you willing to risk? Because some other team might look at the context and say, all right, I get there are efficiency issues. I get there are shot profile issues. I get that there's just shooting issues in general. But I'm going to discard that because my team actually is even more talent deficient. They might be competing with Detroit, who is even more talent deficient than the Charlotte Hornets are. But I agree with you. Like, he is a talented player, and the Hornets are pretty short on talent. And so I think this really is going to be a difficult decision. I'm going to be very fair about it and say this is not going to be an easy decision for the Charlotte Hornets. I would say, after those charges were dropped on earlier this year, he has not come up in the headlines for anything negative. Yep. So if that continues to happen, then at least the PR side of this gets a lot easier. But this is going to be a difficult decision, just basketball wise, for the Hornets.
Yeah, and from Miles's standpoint, like because sometimes you say, well, maybe he'll do like a short-term contract with maybe a contender, have a good year. But at this point, like, he's really gone 2 years. Now, obviously he got paid this year, but he didn't get the $30 million. He never got that. And there was a 2-year gap where he didn't get paid at all 1 year. And then he got really a minimum type of deal versus what he could have gotten this year. You know what I mean? So he's gone 2 years of his prime without, that big payday or that security of a guaranteed contract longer than 1 year. So how he approaches that is going to be really interesting.
Well, yeah, and look, when he took the qualifying offer, I think we talked about the risk of that being him getting injured. Well, he hasn't gotten injured this season. He's been very available, very durable. But I guess what we failed to talk enough about is that you're not only putting yourself at risk of being a victim of circumstance in terms of your own body. When you sign the short-term deal, especially when you need it to be a prove-it deal, you're also putting yourself up to be a victim of the circumstances of your own team, right? Because if this team were healthy, I imagine some of these stats for Miles would look a lot better. And so, but they don't, because this team has been short on playmakers who would probably make Miles, make some of these stats for Miles look a little bit better. Miles has definitely played outside of the bounds playmaking wise that he's capable of, and it's led to a lot of turnovers for him and a lot of play where you go, God, what's going on there? Why take that shot? So yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult for him. I'm in agreement with you. I think that, well, certainly I don't think he's going to take another 1 year deal. Could he take maybe a 2 or 3 year deal as opposed to maxing out the distance of that contract? Yeah, maybe. We'll have to see how it plays out. But yeah, I think this is going to be one of the more interesting negotiations in Charlotte Hornets history. But it's almost a guarantee that they're going to be part of that discussion, right?
Yeah.
And they're not guaranteed to get Miles Bridges at the end of the day, but they're going to be part of that discussion. And they do have some inbuilt advantages in terms of both the amount of money that they could offer him if they wanted to, and also some of the player relationships that he's built here that could play a factor when we get to July.
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
And I mean, well, are they going to have, how those conversations are going to shake out? They're not going to be able to go to Miles and say, hey, we need you to be team friendly on this one because we still need some money to add other pieces, right? So, I mean, they're still looking to change the landscape of the roster with adding a draft pick, hopefully getting some free agents. They've got more flexibility than they have in the past, but that's going to be a big piece. Like, how big of a piece is that going to be? I could see, could you see a team that's not as good throwing years and money at him and him taking it? I could certainly see that just because of what he's lost over the last 2 years. But Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be interesting again for like the third year in a row.
Right.
This is still going on.
Around and around she goes.
Yeah.
Wherever she stops, nobody knows. So we will see. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Locked On Hornets and bearing with us through some of these tech issues. If you've been listening, other than not hearing Walker's voice, it's been pretty similar for you. But we'll get back to it tomorrow. Thanks so much to the people that made this show happen. Thanks to Walker for joining us. And thanks to you for listening and continuing to support what we do here every single day for free for you. Join me on my Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Follow David on Twitter at David B. Walker. And we will be back tomorrow. Go Hornets. Go America. Let's swarm Charlotte.